brought into limelight the manipulation, schemes and the weaponization of several human endeavors that the world had hitherto applauded. The innovations ascribed to science and technology in times past literally became exposed as instruments in the hands of eugenicists, arsonists and oligarchs, whose age-long ambition have been to subjugate and summarily depopulate the world. So when the COVID debacle hit the airwaves in 2020, one of their core focus was data management. Essentially to propel the propaganda of a pandemic so-called. While the world cringed with fear during the time, one key operation that had been unnoticed for many years was a large-scale weaponization of data.
We have to recognize that we are dealing with manufacturers of data and crisis producers. They're creating new data, and because they know you need data to work with, okay? Your inferences will come from the data that you use, that you analyze. So they're manufacturing data for you to use and come to conclusions. And your conclusions are definitely going to go in the way of their choosing because they created the data.
Historically, available data about pandemics such as the Spanish flu and swine flu have been proven to be largely manufactured and concocted to foster the age-long agenda of totalitarianism and world depopulation.
They keep claiming over 50 million people died at the Spanish flu. Question: whoever perused the data? Whoever did? You say it because they told you. Now you, exactly. Now you know they've been a lie all the time. All the time.
The 1918 Spanish influenza. It's estimated that it killed between 50 and 100 million people worldwide. This catastrophic pandemic has been encased in a false narrative for over a century. An examination of the facts reveals a plethora of similarities between that false narrative of the pandemic in 1918 and the 2020 coronavirus pandemic. The 1918 pandemic did not emanate from Spain. It was not a flu, nor was it caused by a virus. In January 1918, an experimental meningitis vaccine made from the pus of horses was tested on soldiers. Gates wrote that shortly after being injected, soldiers exhibited flu-like symptoms, including cough, vomiting, and diarrhea. The reactions, he said, simulated the onset of epidemic meningitis. But Dr. Gates brushed it aside and declared it was not actual meningitis. One wonders what science Dr. Gates relied on. Influenza outbreaks were reported at 14 of the biggest armed force training camps. Recovered troops carried and transmitted the infection to healthy soldiers in the battlefields of Europe. When World War I ended on November 11, 1918, soldiers returned to their home, spreading the killer bacterial pneumonia worldwide. One of the most important eyewitnesses was Dr. Eleanor McBean. She witnessed the human carnage at the age of 13. She and her African-American family did not get vaccinated. They remained healthy throughout the pandemic. She became a doctor and authored several books, including The Poisoned Needle, 1957, Vaccination, the Silent Killer, 1977, and Swine Flu Expose, 1977. She provided very vivid descriptions. I'll read a little bit. When the flu was at its peak, all the stores were closed, as well as the schools, businesses, even the hospital, as the doctors and nurses had been vaccinated and were down with the flu. No one was on the streets. It was like a ghost town. We seemed to be the only family which didn't get the flu. So my parents went from house to house, doing what they could to look after the sick, as it was impossible to get a doctor. She wrote that only those who were vaccinated perished. Sound familiar?
Yes.
And when the war ended, the Rockefeller Institute sent the deadly meningitis concoction for use in civilians in England, France, Belgium, Italy, and other Western European countries, thereby spreading the epidemic worldwide. Was the decision to ship the deadly vaccine abroad once they already knew what it was doing? Was it just for profit über alles, or was it part of a eugenics genocide playbook?
When I was a child, I thought like a child. Okay? Now that I've become a man, I've put away childish things. So, you know, the Spanish flu was so terrible. It was the worst ever. It's like when we were watching, during the prayer day,